Stand up as he called you, please. What did you say? The 4 fishermen that Jesus first called to be his followers. He and John, his brother, were included in Jesus' inner circle. He was one of the 3 that fell asleep when Jesus was praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, the night he was betrayed and taken captive to be crucified. He is one of the 3 that was invited by Jesus up onto the mountaintop when Jesus was transfigured into the glowing white figure with Moses on his right side and Elijah on his left. This is James, the brother of John, the sons of Zebedee. So it says that Herod had James seized and killed with the sword. No Oscars here today. James was the first of the 12 apostles to be martyred. All the others were also martyred except for one, and that was James's brother, John. The 2 brothers were the first and the last of the 12 to die. But this doesn't mean that John's life was easy, because we know that he suffered a lot of torture on many occasions, and he was exiled to the island of Patmos, where God gave him a vision, and he wrote it down in the final book of the Bible, Revelation. We know that in Matthew 20, verses 20 and 28, James and John's mother went to Jesus and said, "Please do something very special for my sons." Do you remember what she asked? Put them on the right and left hand. Make them your number 1 and number 2 guys. And Jesus said, what? Before he said, "I don't have the authority to do it," that's God's decision, he said something else. He said,
"Are you able to be baptized the same?"
No, close. Drink from the cup that I drink from. Are you able to drink from the same cup that I am? And these guys, arrogant as they were, had no idea what he's talking about, and said, "Sure, Jesus, we can do that. If you can drink it, we can drink it." And Jesus responded and said, "You surely will. You surely will drink of the same cup that I drink." And he's talking about the suffering he was going to experience, the persecution and the martyrdom. He was talking about the pain and suffering for the gospel. And so James here experiences the first suffering, just as Jesus said. And John, too, experiences extensive suffering at the gospel. They did experience, as Jesus prophesied. They drank from the same cup that Jesus drank. One last thing before we go on with the story is that the other disciples never replaced James. Do you remember they replaced Judas? But the Bible never talks about replacing James. There's a very important reason for this. What happened in chapters 10 and 11 of Acts, which we just finished studying, that might be significant in this respect? What happened? Do you remember? Cornelius has his vision. Peter has his vision. The Gentiles are welcomed into God's plan of salvation. The gospel must go first to whom? The Jews, and then to the Gentiles. As long as the gospel was going to the Jews, it was very important that the number of apostles be 12, representative of the 12 tribes of Israel, the Jews, the Israelites. The gospel was going to them. Now that the gospel has begun to go to the Gentiles, the number 12 no longer holds the same importance. And so, James is the first of the 12 to die, one at a time, by martyrdom. Verse 3 goes on and says that Herod saw that James's execution pleased the Jews. It pleased the Jews. Should we act it out again? Kill him again. Becky's giving a standing ovation. She's jumping up and down and cheering. I never saw her so animated. She's coming down to take the sword and lend a hand. When Herod saw that this pleased sees the Jews in Jerusalem, he proceeded to arrest Peter also. Oh, these guys like this part. Now this was during the festival of unleavened bread. The timing here is symbolic. Be sure to note that Herod seized Peter during the festival of unleavened bread, and see what happens at the end of the story during the Passover. Remember, the Passover commemorates Israel's exodus from Egypt. So watch what happens during the Passover. Verse 4 says, when they had seized him, he put him in prison and handed him over to 4 squads of 4 soldiers each to guard him, intending to bring him out to the people after the Passover. The passage here says there are 4 squads of 4 soldiers each. We only have 4 up front because the squads took turns, 6-hour watches. 4 soldiers at any given time would be watching Peter. And when was he planning to kill Peter? When? I heard 2 people. Do you know? Did you catch it? When? Passover. Right after Passover. He was waiting for the end of Passover. So there could be a 1 day or up to 1 week of time between them. It seems there was at least several days, as the Bible describes the apostles praying night and day for his safe release. Verse 5 says, while Peter was kept in prison, the church prayed fervently to God for him. So guards, I want you to take him to the prison. The prison is all the way in the back there, right at the back of the center aisle. There's your prison. Herod, I'm going to have you take a seat right over here. Just for right now. Right here. Will you move this back there when it's time for Herod to come back? No, right here in the center aisle. Right here so everybody can see.
It's over here.
Right here. Okay. Now we need 2 guards, 1 on either side, and then we're going to need 2 guards down here. Here's your gate. Here's your prison door. All right? Your prison cell is about that big, much smaller perhaps. You've got 1 guard on the inside of the door, 1 guard on the outside. So even if he gets free and kills 3 of the guards without weapons while he's chained, he's a kung fu master. He still won't be able to get through the gate because the guard on the outside has the key. And he's not about to unlock that door. And he's got the sword. Right. Okay, so here's our guards. This is our setup. Church, what are you supposed to be doing? Praying fervently. So gather around, grab hands, form a big circle. Men, you stay right where you are or whatever. Go ahead and stand up. It's okay. You guys are praying fervently for Peter's release. Okay, good. There you go. All right, so now we have our setup. We have our situation. Peter is in prison. The church is praying night and day for his release. James, if you want to go back, you're welcome to go back. If you want to sit there. Actually, while you go back, will you take that belt and give it to Peter? He's going to need his belt. He left the belt behind. Now remember, church, you're praying for the release of Peter. In your midst is his brother Andrew, who's very worried about Peter. Also with you is John. What happened just recently to him? His brother was killed. So this is a very emotional time for you. You're very scared. You're mourning. You're praying night and day for the release of Peter. Peter is in chains, bound on either side, surrounded by guards. And the story continues in verse 6. The very night before Herod was going to bring him out. What night is it? What's today? Passover. Herod was going to bring him out the day after